All right, then we get to Central Asian. Um, and Central Asian is pretty interesting. It's somewhat similar to Arab and North African, but um, there are some differences. So people still wear the turban, for example, um, but they'll also wear head hats that are more similar to the local climate, like the dopa, which is a black skull cap that was square with pointy edges, and the karakul, which is a peaked back black cap. And then men would not wear the thawb, but they would wear the kalat, which is a loose, long-sleeved robe that was worn by both genders. And because it is a very Islamic part of the world, women would have to wear similar clothing to Arab and North African women. And so they'd usually wear a paranja, which covered the head and the body, in a way that's similar to the niqab or the hijab. Or in Afghanistan, they would just wear a full-on burqa, which covers fully the body and the face, and basically only leaves a slit for the eyes. However, when I say Central Asian clothing, I mainly mean what's going on in Uzbekistan and Afghanistan. All right, so let's look at some examples. So first we have the Bukharan Jews, and of course they're not Muslims, but they were quite influenced by the clothing around them. And I always thought this picture was very cool. It's an old picture that was colorized, but colorized at the time. And so that's why it doesn't look necessarily like a modern photograph.
That's a Birkenau Jew.
Bukharan. All right, then we get the Pashtun, the main group in Afghanistan. So most of the Taliban are from this group. And yeah, you can kind of tell from the way the women are dressed that, yeah, this is what the Taliban women would be wearing. So I'd say it's almost as bad as Maghrebi. Maghrebi, I have to say, is still the worst, but this comes very close. So here they're wearing the niqab, of course. Um,
That
while the
one's
men
wearing,
here,
look, that one's wearing high heels.
yeah, while the men here are wearing a turban. Um, we can see, of course, very obvious Arab and North African influences, but also some local ones, especially with what the men are wearing. Next, we got the Uzbek people. Um, from the Uzbeks, I don't know, this may be just a slight improvement from the Pashtuns in terms of what the women are wearing. So she has a longer veil, but it's super.
No, don't kill yourself.
Oh, my cat's trying to like jump off the edge.
Don't kill yourself.
She basically fully covers her face. You can't see anything here. Full black veil. Men's a bit better, wearing the turban, or wearing the same kind of robe that we saw among the Pashtuns. But yeah, also I just noticed now you can't even see her hands. So you literally can't see anything with the Uzbeks. Now let's get the Tajik and Uyghur. All right, so Tajik and Uyghur clothing was pretty beautiful in my opinion because of the very intricate embroidery and patterns that was found on the women's dresses, which were often very colorful. Then on top of this, they would wear a veil or a cape, which was decorated pretty similarly. However, because these groups were also Islamic, women would still cover their hair with what is known as a tubeteka, which is a kind of skull cap, but that did not cover necessarily all their hair, but which could still fall down uncovered from behind or the sides. All right, so the first example is the Tajiks, of course, lived in Tajikistan, although a lot of Tajiks lived in Afghanistan as well. Um, so yeah, I think it's pretty cool. Also very scenic photograph by whoever made this. And then the others, the Uyghurs. And this might become more important because the Uyghurs are now facing genocide. And so who knows how long it'll be before clothing like this completely disappears. Tajik Uyghur. Okay, now we're gonna get to Kazakh and Kyrgyz. All right, so Kazakh and Kyrgyz clothing reflected their nomadic and their steppe background very strongly, and most of their clothing was made from horsehair, fox, fur, wool, or rabbit hides. For headgear, they would generally wear the kalpak, which is a high-crowned cap that would keep the head warm in the winter and provide shade in the summer. For coats, the chapan was usually worn during the winter, which had intricate threading and a variety of colors and patterns. And men would wear two types of skin shirts, inner and outer trousers with silk patterns, and fur, and loose-fitting robes. Then jackets were also dark with a cloth lining and decorated with traditional patterns. Meanwhile, women would wear a shirt known as a koylek, and on top of this, they would wear a coat known as a kupe, or it was usually lined with fur or wool and would be embroidered. So that's a lot of words. So let's just visually see this so you understand a little better what I'm talking about. So first of all, here we have the Kazakh people, of course, they're in Kazakhstan. And yeah, very much obviously a nomadic Central Asian kind of looking clothing of what you would expect. In fact, this guy is literally riding a horse in this picture. So the women, as we can see, their heads are covered, which again is, of course, common for Muslim women. Um, but yeah, the Kazakh guy especially sort of almost looks Mongolian, right? Which makes sense because it has similar climate. Very hot in the summer, very cold in the winter. And I assume this probably was more made in the winter based on the kind of clothing. And then for Kyrgyz, and Kyrgyz clothing was pretty interesting. So again, the hair is covered, but it's like not super necessarily Islamic, so to say. And they have, if I remember, I think it's called pleated dresses. Basically, when you have several of these layers, it's called a pleat. And so yeah, it looks very cool, very unique. All right, so now we get to South Asian clothing. This part's going to be a tad longer, but we will read it nevertheless because South Asian is very important. So of course, South Asia, which again writes India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, um, Nepal, right, that area. They didn't all have the same clothing style. This is a huge group of people. This is like almost 2 billion people living here. But of course, there are certain common characteristics. Women would wear the sari, a robe with one end attached to the waist, while the other one would rest over the shoulder like a shawl. It would be worn with a choli, which was a blouse that's been worn since the first millennium BC, and also a gagra choli, which is a combination of a skirt and a blouse. And this is because it combines the choli with the lehenga, or an ankle-length skirt. It would be combined with the dupatta, or a long shawl-like scarf that's worn across both shoulders and around the head. And the lehenga would mainly be worn during festivals and special events, such as weddings. For their head, meanwhile, men would wear the pagri, or a type of turban, which could take several forms, sorry. For the main kind of clothing, the sherwani was pretty common, which was a long-sleeved outer coat that is buttoned down the front and falls below the knees. And as well, they would wear churidars, which are tight trousers worn by men and women, and usually worn with a shalwar kameez, which is a combination of trousers and a tunic and a kurta, or a loose collarless shirt, that actually traces its roots to Central Asian tunics. Now, of course, back in the day, shoes were sometimes worn, but generally, a lot of people didn't wear shoes. All right, so now let's look at some examples, although, of course, probably most people have met South Asians in their life, so it's not necessarily super uncommon. We start off with the Kashmiri people in Kashmir, and because it's a controversial subject, I will not be discussing whether I think Kashmir is part of India or Pakistan. I will just say it is Kashmir, and I'll let you guys in the comments decide which country it belongs to. But yeah, so we see the trousers here, the shirt. These men here, I believe, probably are Hindu. You can, especially with the red, probably red, I can't tell, but it's probably the red dot that's very commonly worn with Hindus. So we see that here. All right, this is the Shina people. I forget what part of India they live in, honestly. The Khas. So the Khas are the main group in Nepal, actually. And this guy here on the right is wearing what's known as the Nepali national costume. So you can see he has this kind of longer shirt that this guy's wearing alongside the hat and the trousers as well. Although we can also see a more traditional form of clothing that was worn by the Khas over here. So yeah, Khas, main group in Nepal. All right, then we have Dogra people, and I know who took the picture because he wrote it right here, Raj Kumari Dr. Jyotsna Singh. And yeah, so this woman is sort of wearing what's similar to a sari, the veil. Punjabi people, so yeah, these people don't look like they're having a lot of fun. They probably did some hard labor. And yeah, Punjab is an area that's in both shared by India and Pakistan. And a lot of them are Sikhs, but there are also a lot of Muslim Punjabis as well. So I think the capital of Pakistan is within Punjab, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so this guy has a very interesting kind of turban. Saraiki guy, and I think Saraikis live in northern India, but I could be mistaken. I'm trying to remember my general Indian geography and culture. Sindhi, so they live in Sindh. Sindh is an area that is basically right southwest of, no, not southwest, southeast, sorry, of Pakistan. It's a part of India, and it has a drier climate. So, an example of Sindhi woman, and yeah, she is wearing the typical Indian trousers as well as the veil over her head. All right. These are the Marwari people who live in Marwar, which I also think is in northwestern India generally, but again, I'll need to check up on my geography there. But yeah, we sort of see, the man's wearing the wide baggy trousers, and whereas the woman, again, wearing the veil. We see this veil all across, Indian subcontinent, and a lot of jewelry, and especially like sort of rings. So we see them here on her arm and also on her feet over there. Gujarati people, I know it's a bit of a blurry picture, but yeah, live in Gujarat, which is also more northern and western part of India. Saurashtra people, the Banjara. I don't think they're a very big group because I never heard of them before. Um, and these people look, yeah, probably a little poorer. But you also notice another thing, they're all pretty much wearing nose rings. But like not the liberal kind of nose rings where like it goes through your, both nostrils. Um, just one side. Seems to all be in their left nostril for some reason. Not sure exactly why that is. Of course, we get the Hindi people, who of course are one of the largest groups in India, and their language is the most spoken in India, other than maybe English. I don't know if they're more English or Hindi speakers. Probably more Hindi speakers, but who knows? Either way, it's the largest native language to the area, and that's what matters. Then we got the Deccani people. So the Deccan Plateau is sort of more western central India. But yeah, I thought I was like this picture. Maybe it's the background. I thought it was a pretty cool background. Also has nice jewelry over there. Then we got the Indo-Caribbean people. And so yeah, I have actually included the Indian diaspora for this as well. So even though she's not in South Asia, this is actually from Trinidad. We can see it written down here. Obviously, the clothing is from India. And so we can see that style of clothing was brought in by the Indians who went to the Caribbean there. The Assamese, Assam is in northeastern India. It's one of the easternmost parts of India. And yeah, I always thought this picture was cool too. These two look like they're vibing, having a good time together. Not sure what this is. First thought it was cigar, but probably not. Uh, Bengali people, one of the biggest groups in India, and of course the main group in Bangladesh, but also in surrounding areas like Kolkata. So this is actually a famous painting. I forget by who, but I think it depicts, yeah, Bengali woman sometime in the 18th or 19th century. And then this is a
Why
man,
she
and he's
white?
just um, probably because she's rich. And then this guy is just working out in the salt. You can also see sort of a difference here in skin color too, because this guy's out more in the sun, whereas she probably stays indoors most of the time. And is this Selheti? So it's interesting. You can kind of tell even just from the pose here what kind of dance they're doing, and is a dance that's common in northeastern India. Also from the features here, they definitely look more South Asian, but they also look a little bit more East or Southeast Asian. And that's because the Sylheti are probably a little mixed with the Eastern Asians who live near where they live. But we can tell obviously from the clothing and from their general look that they are for sure, more South Asian culturally. Here's an example of, yeah, an East Asian person and a South Asian person. So I'm assuming again this is probably on the border, maybe with Myanmar or China, the Bhojpuris. So this Nagpuria woman is, yeah, wearing a sari. So this is sort of what I was talking about, sort of wrapped around here at the waist, and then with one part draped over the shoulder. So it's a very common kind of clothing we see. And this would be in the Nagpur region of India, which I think is northeast. But again, if I'm wrong, please correct me in the chat. I need to learn my Indian geography better. Odia people are found in Odisha, I want to say, or is it Orissa? I'm not sure how exactly you pronounce that place, but that's also sort of eastern India. Marathi people, Maharashtra, I think, and that's more southern and western part of India. And so this woman here, I think, because I looked a little bit at the picture, I think she was part of the upper class. So that's why you can tell probably from the background she's pretty well off. But yeah, she's also wearing a sari here. And again, we see, right, the covered head and then the red dot. So a Hindu. Okay, so Sinhalese, they're the main people in Sri Lanka, and we can see their clothing is much more simple. And also, it's a bit different. They're not covering their head, they're not really wearing a sari. But the reason why is because Sinhalese are Buddhists and they're not Hindus. And so that probably is a major influence on their style of clothing. And also, they live on an island, so they're more isolated, I guess, from the rest of the subcontinent. All right, moving on. Maldivians, they live in the Maldives, an area that might not even exist for that long. But she's taking a very nice, leisurely stroll on the beach. No idea where these guys are, the Gadaba, but I think they're probably one of the tribal peoples in India. All right, the Tamil. So the Tamil live in Tamil Nadu as well as part of Sri Lanka. There was actually a big war between the Tamils and the Sinhalese back in the day, and some of the Tamils were terrorists. But um, yeah, Tamils are a very important group in India. Again, sort of the southeastern tip of the country, as well as northeastern Sri Lanka. And this dance, I'm trying to remember what it's called because I looked into it. I think it's called the Bharatanatyam dance. And yeah, it's probably the most popular kind of dance, traditional dance at least, within South Asia. And so we can see they have a very interesting kind of lower garment because it sort of looks like a dress, but it also is kind of trousers as well. So it's like an interesting mix there between the two. And then we can see this red dot here, like here on the head, but also palms and the feet. So I'm actually wondering, like, someone knows what does the red dot mean exactly? Seems to be very common all across this region. The Kannadiga speak the Kannada language, and so that's pretty interesting. That's the main reason I remember them, but has absolutely nothing to do with Canada. Then Malayali people live in Malayalam, I think, and I think that's also somewhere southern India, but I'm not 100% sure of that fact. Well, I shouldn't say it's a fact if I don't know, but not 100% sure. But yeah, these people look like they're probably going to a temple based on the way they're dressed. All right, the Kota, I always thought they were interesting just because of like this guy's look and also his weird hairstyle. And I mean, this is a woman. I think this is a man, although maybe it's a woman. I really don't know. Maybe they're trans. The Kodava. Now, this is one of the most interesting ones for very obvious reasons. Kodava have a very interesting kind of, I guess, outfit that they use for dances to the point where everything, like literally their entire body except their feet here, are covered. And the amount of jewelry and just other accessories is kind of insane. So I'll just stay here a little longer so we can look at the Kodava clothing. But yeah, I believe this is for some kind of dance that they wear this. The guys in the background are just wearing much simpler clothing. And yeah, to be honest, no idea what part of South Asia they live in. But yeah, as you can see, a lot of the clothing is cool, which is why I have a lot of South Asian examples here. Telugu, I do know they live in southern India, but I can't remember the state at all. But this is clearly a wedding, right? You can see they're smiling, they're holding hands, right? They're dressed very well. They both have lots of wreaths and flowers and jewelry all over. They're playing footsies down here too. Also, his feet is huge. It's crazy. Anyways, so yeah, this is a wedding with the Telugu people. Chenchu, I think they're tribal
These
people.
guys look like they have pineapples on
Yeah, Murad said they look like they have pineapples on their head. Same with the Gandhi people, not to be confused with Gandhi. So yeah, similar groups. Oh yeah, and I think this is the last one. Indian South Africans, and obviously from the name you can tell where they live. It's actually a decent sized Indian community in South Africa. And yeah, generally for South Asians, I quite like their clothing. I think it looks pretty cool. Very nice decorations, lots of jewelry. They try their best to look good. So, oh, actually, there are a couple more. Dimasa, Brokpa, I think, live in Nepal. And because of the different climate, that's why their clothing looks a little more different there.